Hi, everyone, and welcome to class lecture from my living room. I know that this is just an odd time, and this is not what we planned when the semester began, but I'm hoping to make the most out of it, even if we get to see each other only remotely. So today what I'd like to do is talk about resume writing. This is a really important skill that we need when we're applying for a job. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the components of a resume. You're going to be writing a resume this week, and so all of these components are going to be really important for you to consider and think about carefully while you're writing your resume. Now, some of you might already have a resume, and that's good. There's different kinds of resumes you can have. There's just the kind of the one-size-fits-all resume, where if you were going to a job fair or something like that, that you could give out a resume that just kind of, whatever job it is, I'll just give this resume out. But what I'm going to talk about particularly is called the tailored resume. And this is a resume that is specific for a specific job. So in reality, if you apply for 3 jobs, you're going to have 3 different resumes. Now, they are probably going to have the same content, but they're not going to be identical, because the goal of a resume is to fit the need of the employer. The person that you're writing the resume for, that's who we're thinking about when we're writing the resume. Not who we are and what we want to get across, but what does the employer want? What is the employer looking for? What do I possess that is important to this employer? And that might be different for every person that you, or every position that you apply for. So I'm going to spin the camera around here because I have a handy dandy PowerPoint to go with this. And I wanted to make sure that I could use this PowerPoint while I was talking to you so that you could see it, and gain benefits from it. I'm also posting this PowerPoint, there we go, along with this lecture so that you can make sure to see all of the details in the PowerPoint as well. Okay, so we are preparing a winning resume. This is a resume that is going to get your foot in the door, hopefully. So the purpose of a resume is to win an interview. The whole purpose of what we're doing isn't just to give information. This is a persuasive document. Our goal is to have the employer look at that document and say, wow, this candidate is really outstanding. I need to invite that person back for an interview. Also in our resume, we're demonstrating skills that every employer is looking for. Things like organization and writing and spelling and grammar, and even the layout of the document talks about who we are and the skills that we have. It is a document that you're going to communicate your strengths and your qualifications and your experiences. But don't think of it as a list. Think of it as a persuasive tool that you're going to use to communicate and advocate for the job. And this is why there are some interesting job statistics here that we need to pay attention to. So one is that one job in the corporate world attracts between 100 and 1,000 resumes. So this isn't like the little mom and pop stores, but these are the big corporations that have awesome benefits, whether it be like an oil company, or whether it be a banking company, or whether it be a tech company. 100 to 1,000 resumes for every position. And of those, your resume is going to get a glance of about 10 to 20 seconds. That's not very long to create an impression that gets you an interview. And for every one interview is granted for every 200 resumes that are received. So like 1 in 200, our odds aren't that great, especially if our resume isn't stellar, because we're competing against others who have similar qualifications, similar experience, similar education. So what makes us stand apart so that when they're looking at our resume, they say, wow, this person deserves an interview. One of the answers to that question is the top third of the resume is going to get the most attention. So we're going to think about and focus our efforts into being persuasive on the top third of the resume. So next we're going to talk about the different components of the resume. These are the things that go into the resume, and each one of them has a specific purpose and is done in a specific way. So first is the heading. And the heading is located at the top of the resume. Some things are flexible and we can move them around in the resume. The heading is not one of them. The heading will go at the very top of the resume. So here's an example of a heading. This one includes the person's name, telephone number, email address, city and state and zip code of where that person is living, and their website. So this is what the heading looks like. Another heading is this one, where it's the person's name, again, the email address, telephone number, mailing address in this one, and it says open for relocation. So this is the information that you want to provide the employer that talks about your contact information. This needs to include, for sure, your name, obviously, your phone number, obviously, and an email address. Anything else is up to you, including city and state. If you have a website or a LinkedIn account, those are things that you could add to the heading that will allow the employer to learn more about you if they're interested. This can also include the city and state, website, and LinkedIn. Now, the thing about the header is that your name needs to be the largest part of the resume. It's going to stand out far beyond anything else in your resume. So it needs to be at least 16-point font, at least. It might be larger depending on kind of the proportions of your resume. It could be 20, 24-point font. The shorter your name, the bigger it's going to be because it needs to have that presence. If you've got 12 letters in your name, it might not necessarily need to be as large, but no smaller than 16-point font. Also remember that your email address should be tasteful. Make sure that it is something that you can share with others and they don't form a bad opinion of you based on what your email address is. So the next part of the resume is the position statement or professional summary or objective. Those are all words that mean the same thing. This is the section that would go next after the heading, and I would say this is the most persuasive part of your document. This is the part that you can really display persuasive language and highlight your skills or experience or something that makes you unique and different from others who might be applying for this job. Now, technically, this position summary is it doesn't have to be in your resume, but I would really encourage you to spend time on it because everyone has work experience, everyone has education experience, but this is something that you can design that's eye-catching and different than what other people might come up with. So this states, according to the slide, the qualities and abilities that will make you stand out, make you unique and different from others. Here's an example of a summary. I like these types of summaries because it gives both a little bit of a sentence and some bullets. So I'm going to read this one to you because I think it is well written. More than 9 years
consultative sales experience in the information technology sector, selling to Fortune 1000 companies throughout the Northeast. A demonstrated track record of exceeding quota and customer service needs. Areas of expertise include bullet, 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 bullet. So this is, remember, the top third of the resume is really important, and this is just a great way to do a little showcase of what makes you different and unique. All the other sections are going to sound a little bit similar, whoever they are, but this is something that you can really work at. What I would challenge you to do is to Google position summaries or executive summaries or objective statements and see all the different types that you can find. Now, please don't copy and paste someone else's position summary into your resume. Yours needs to be unique to you, but through reading different ones, you can kind of understand the way they're written and the language that's used that you can model yours after. So things that you can remember about the position summary, it is things that make you unique or different and things that you think the employer is looking for in a potential candidate. Sentences, bullets, something else, you'll find different formats. Just make sure that it's the thing that really grabs the reader's attention. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the education section of your resume. This does not necessarily have to go next, but it is a section that has to be on your resume somewhere. And the education includes anything above high school, meaning you have already completed at least this semester almost of college, and so high school is irrelevant. You do not need to include your high school experience if you have college experience. It just isn't necessary, and it doesn't add to your resume at all. So in your education, you need to include the institutions or colleges that you've attended. If you've attended more than one, only put those that either granted you a degree or that you got more than 30 credit hours from. So if you took a couple of classes somewhere else, that doesn't count. You don't need to include those names of those institutions in your resume. Only if it was over 30 hours or you received a certificate or degree from that institution. In the education section, you need to include the name of the college, so Central Texas College, the location, like Killeen, Texas, your major, business management, education, information technology, history, or government. So your major, and then your degree. You are pursuing an Associates of Applied Science or Associate of Arts or Associate of Science. So the major and the degree are different. The date of graduation, if it's something that you've already completed, you put the month and the year, like May of 2018. Or if you are still working on that degree and haven't completed it yet, you can say anticipated date of graduation. So it sounds like, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm heading, I'm not there yet. We don't want to make it sound like we've already received the degree if we haven't yet. But we want the employer to know we're working toward it and we have a game plan. So it doesn't also sound like we're just kind of, let's see, maybe in the next 5 years. So we have a purpose and we're working toward it. If your GPA is above a 3.0, you can include that. Or if your GPA in your major is above a 3.0, you can include that. Say GPA in major 3.2, something like that. That allows the employer to know that you are a serious student and that you are putting your education, you're taking it seriously. So here is an example. If you can't see this very well, your slides will show you as you're looking through them. This is an example of a nice way of including education information. The Technical Community College of Durham, North Carolina, Associate in Applied Science degree, paralegal technology is the major, GPA 3.75, date of graduation August 2016. And then they included a couple bullets, and in these bullets communicated courses that you think the employer would like you to have had, that highlight different skills you need. This includes, for her, property law, covenants, titles, real estate contracts, deeds, all of the things that that person might be doing in a job. So for you, maybe business and professional speaking is a course that you think the employer would really benefit from knowing. You can speak, you can write, and you are able to communicate in a clear fashion. So those are important things that you could include in your education section. Okay, so the next section I want to talk about in the resume is the work experience. So you could do your position summary, and then you could do your work experience and then your education. Or you can do your position summary and then your education and then your work. It really depends on what you think is going to stand out the most. So for me, I went and got my master's degree at Texas A&M University. I'm always going to put that at the top because I have my master's degree, but also because anyone who might be looking at that resume and sees that I went to A&M, and if they went to A&M too, there might be a connection, just a little spark that makes them go, ooh, an Aggie. I'm going to look at this resume for a little bit longer. So those are tips that you can think of. Maybe it's not your education that you think is going to stand out, but your work experience. And so that can definitely go after the position summary in your resume. So work experience includes these things: the employer's name, so where you worked, and the location, the city and state in which you worked in, the dates of employment, when did you do this job. If it was like multiple years, you can just use years. It was 2006 through 2020, then you can just do years. If it was just less than a year or a little over a year, you can put dates like March of 2019 to February of 2020. That is an example. So you can use the month and the year if it's a short duration. And if it's a long duration, you can just use the years. And you're also going to include job title. So if you've had multiple job titles, the one that was most senior or that had the most seniority is fine. If your job titles, like I'm thinking of military experience, really changed, like they were significantly different, you can include under the United States Army, you can include several different job titles and the descriptions of your responsibilities under those job titles. For those of us in civilian work, we don't necessarily have all these different job titles that were equally important. Usually you work your way up. So if that's the case, the most important job title is all we need. You're going to list jobs on your resume in reverse chronological order. This means that the most recent goes first. So if you have a job now, that is going to be your first entry in your work experience. If you're not working now, but you have in the past, the one that you worked in most recently is going to go first. They go in reverse chronological order, backwards. So talking about this backwards, for the jobs that you did in the past, you're going to use past tense. So a job that I did 10 years ago that I'm no longer at, I managed, I led, I supervised. See, past tense language. But for a job that I'm doing now, I'm going to use present tense language because it's what I'm doing. I manage, I supervise, I lead. And so there is a difference in the way we structure the language depending on the past or present. So be very careful about that because that's an error that can really kind of just get your resume skipped over. So when we're thinking about the job descriptions that we're going to include in the resume, in that work experience, You can talk about things that were most important. We might not necessarily need to know every single thing you did. Think about the things that are going to highlight important skills you think the employer is going to value. That could be time management. That could be working with people. That could be taking on more responsibility. That could be awards that you received. But you don't have to tell us that every Thursday you mop the floor, or that you made sure to lock the door every night before you left. We don't need to know every single detail. We need to know the things that matter to employers. The things to emphasize include communication skills, the people that you talk to, the people that you worked with, whether that be at work or customers that you worked with. Interpersonal capabilities, things that we've talked about all semester long, conflict management, working with others well, listening skills, being other-oriented, considering the thoughts and feelings of others, putting other people first, anything that really highlights your ability to get along and work well with other people. Leadership opportunities. If you've done anything in leadership, those are very good things to highlight. And any teamwork experience. Now, you might be thinking, this is all well and good, but I don't have a job, and I've never had a job. And some of you might be in that position, and that is okay. It is not something that is mandatory in order to write a resume. You will gain that job experience over time. You just might not have it yet. And if that's the case, think about this work experience from an educational standpoint. So maybe you don't have like a paid experience, but maybe you have a volunteer experience, or maybe you've done an internship. Those are great things to emphasize. So volunteering, also you gain things like managing others and communicating with others and getting along with others, even maybe leading and teamwork, definitely. So if we can't think of or understand it from like a paid work experience, we can also think about it from other experiences, such as organizations on campus, or internships, or volunteer experiences. Maybe you are young and you have something in high school that you can highlight. Maybe you were on student government, or maybe you were in the speech and debate team, or something like that. So there's more to it than work experience if you don't have that section. Don't just skip it. We're going to have to rethink how we communicate that information. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples to show you different ways that professional experience or work experience can be communicated. So this is a person who has the information at the top that's included, like this is the position, this is the organization, these are the dates, and then that person had 2 different job descriptions that she wanted to include in this resume. She was project coordinator and management, and she was advanced administrative support. And so in this job, she led both of these different, or held both of these different positions. And then she bulleted 2 bullets per description of what she did. That's great. We have to be careful not to be too wordy in our work experience. Less is more, as long as what we include is awesome, so to speak. We do not want large chunks of information. We do not want paragraphs of information. This is a good rule of thumb. Anything should be no more than 2 sentences before a space. 2 sentences before a space. So don't have a chunk of information. No one is going to read that. And all of that is just wasted space. So 2 lines is all that you need to include for her per bullet. So if you have several things that you want to include in a one job description, make sure that you're thinking of how to word that as clearly and concisely as possible so that you can include more in your resume without it being wordy or descriptive. Here's another example of a workplace experience. So this person had the information, the city and state, and the date, and a 2 and a little bit word blurb, paragraph, and then 4 bullets. And so this person worked there, say, for 15 years, and in that 15 years created 6 lines that described everything that person did in that time period. That's a good way of doing it. If you've got a half a page per work experience, you have covered too much information in too much detail. Another work experience, you can come in. You can come in, just go that way. Another work experience example is this. Again, it's a 2-sentence kind of blurb and then 3 bullet points. This is a lot of information for the eye to look at, and I don't know if I would recommend that, but it's another way of communicating your content. So other parts of the resume that you can consider include a skills and capabilities section. So this is information that didn't get included in any of the other parts of your resume, but you think are important. These skills could include special talents that relate to the job. Don't say, I love to kayak and take pictures if that doesn't have anything to do with the job that you're applying for. But maybe it's computer software skills that you have, a specific kind, a Java or some program that's important to that job. Language fluencies. You can speak. Now, don't say you're fluent in a language that you're not fluent in. If it is, you could say you're conversational if you've got some skills, but it's definitely not fluent. So it could be a language proficiency, communication skills, management, leadership, teamwork. Any of these are examples of things that you could put in a skills and capabilities section. Another section that you could include after the work experience and education could be something like certificates or licenses or additional education. So if you have certificates or you have like your CPR certified and that's important for your job, that could go in this section. For those of you who have been in the military and you have different trainings and different I don't know if they're called certificates or licenses or whatever they are. You can list those in a section that highlights your intention to better yourself and get more out of your career based on those things that you accomplished. You could also include a section that talks about awards or honors or activities or achievements. It could be all of that or any of that or just one of those things. So these are things that you could talk about that are academic in nature or professional in nature that are like, feathers in your cap. Kudos to you for doing these types of things. And this is, if you've got limited work experience, you could highlight this section based on the clubs that you were a part of in high school or the things that you did that were accomplishments. And outside of the work environment that you think are important, that set you apart from others. Another section that's actually becoming even more important in the recent days is the volunteer section. Employers are looking for people who have interest in helping others in some way. And it doesn't have to be within the career field, but just in general. And so this is a really good section to have. So maybe you coached your kids' soccer team, or maybe you volunteer at the local animal shelter, or maybe you work in the nursery at church. Whatever it might be, these are things that you can include in your resume. It could be under community involvement or volunteer experience. If you have an internship, you could have a whole new section that talks about internship experience. So think of who you are, and there's no standard sections that you need to include in the resume besides the work and education experience. So if there's something else that you are thinking of that's not listed here, you can include those as well. So the references don't go on, if you just saw that, the references don't go on the resume. They're going to go on a separate piece of paper, but I just wanted to, you'll see that on the slide, so I was just pointing it out. References, people who could speak highly of you, we'll talk about that later, are not on your resume. So here's an example of a skills section that under like skills and capabilities that a resume has. So it's business skills. And this person talked about marketing, market planning, and product planning. So that's a great way to highlight things that you do or things that you know or skills that you have that might not necessarily stand out in your work experience. Here's an example of technical skills. So this is talking about computer programming and web development and leadership. So these are things that this person really wanted to highlight. And even if some of that was mentioned in the work experience section, they really want to bring that out in a whole new section so that the employer can see these remarkable skills. Here's an example of volunteer experience. The way this person organized it is very similar to the work experience section that we just talked about. It includes the position, the place, the dates, and what this person did. So the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to resumes is the format, the organizational pattern that we're going to follow for the resume. And there's 3 basic ways that you can organize a resume. What most people think of when it comes to resume writing is a chronological resume. And it's just sections. There's the position, there's the education, there's the work experience, and there's the skills. And it's just very clearly 4 different categories in a row on the resume. And a chronological, that's what this is, a chronological resume is really good to use if you have a lot of work experience or you have work experience that fits really well with what the employer is looking for. So that's your standard resume. That's the one that you see most often. That's the one you think of usually when you're talking about resume writing. But it doesn't always fit for everybody. So you might think about a functional resume. And a functional resume focuses on skills and experience rather than detailed work history. So if you don't have a lot of work history, if it's limited, or the work history that you have doesn't necessarily fit with the job that you are applying for, you might think of a functional resume. A good thing to do would be Google it, say examples of a functional resume so that you can see what one looks like. But this focuses on skills rather than past work experience. So maybe I'm going to have a section that talks about communication skills. And then I am going to list classes that I've taken and a job that I've done and award that I won, all revolving around communication skills or teamwork skills or maybe a specific technical skill. So it's really, everything is built around these big skills rather than education, work experience, and then skills. And then the combination is a combination of the chronological and the functional resumes. It kind of tries to get the best of both worlds. There are categories like education and work experience, but that also highlights the skills, like for example, the skills and capabilities section might be larger than the education and work experience. I've seen resumes where literally work experience, it's the name of the employer, the city and state, the job title, and the date, and that's it. And it's just a small list of that. And then there's maybe 3 of them. My puppy dog was saying hi. And then it was like 3, just boom, 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 boom. No job responsibilities because all of that was covered in a more functional type of resume. So lastly, some ways to make your resume stand out or pop. One way is to make it look appealing, make it look interesting, make it look dynamic and stand apart from others. I very highly recommend that you do not use a template to make a resume, because your resume is going to look like every other person who used that same template. There is nothing that stands out if all the resumes look the same. So make sure that you do not use a template. I know you can find templates on Word. I know you can find templates online. And I'm telling you, don't use a template. It's going to take longer for you to build that resume by yourself, but in the long run, it's going to be so much more beneficial to you, because it's going to be something that's going to be unique to you rather than unique to the 35,000 people who downloaded that template. Also, templates often put weird things in weird places. Like there's one template that I often see, and the date of employment is all the way to the left, and then there's this huge gap. And then there's a little section where it allows you to describe what your job was. Why? There's so much wasted space. So don't use a template. Make it visually stand out. Use things like italics and bolding and underlining sparingly, but you can use those in order to make certain things stand out. Also, be consistent. Make sure spacing is consistent. For if you have two work experience entries, make sure those entries are organized the same. Make sure that if you put the job title first for the first entry, the job title is first for the second entry. So make sure everything is consistent. Make sure everything is aligned consistently so that it doesn't look haphazard. Obviously, make sure you spell everything right. Make sure everything is grammatically correct. If you use a punctuation in one, use punctuation in all of them. Also use language that's important, language that's powerful. Action verbs. You can literally Google key terms for, and then whatever job you'd like to make this resume apply for. So key terms for college educator position. Or key terms for elementary education teacher. And they'll have terms or keywords or things to emphasize that are important for that job description, and that will give you some powerful language to use. We just have to be careful not to, I did this, I made this, I worked here, I completed this. Make sure the words that you use to describe your responsibilities in your job are really very impactful. Also, consider unique features. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can jazz up your resume. Things that I've seen a lot are on, what are they called? They're like graphic resumes. And so they've got charts, or they've got a little graphs. There's two websites, Canva, C-A-N-V-A, and Visualize.me, that are websites that you could use to help kind of think of how you can be creative in making that resume stand out. Don't put your picture on your resume. Why would you do that? No reason to put your picture on your resume. So make sure that you're not doing that. Avoid templates and make sure it's flawless. I would recommend after you do this, write your resume, you give it to someone else to read and see if that person catches any flaws in punctuation and spacing and spelling and grammar and past or present tense, so that it is really an outstanding document. You get points taken off for every error you make on the resume, so make sure that it is error-free so you get as many points for this class as you possibly could. So that's more about the resume. So this week, you're going to be working to create your own resume. If you'll see on the online lessons, there's an opportunity for you to turn in the resume early in order to get some bonus points and some feedback from me, and I highly recommend that you do that. We're going to talk about cover letters and references in another lecture, but today I just wanted to talk specifically about the resume. I highly recommend that you start working on it right away so that you have enough time to kind of rework and reword and rethink and tweak it to make it what you think is a really outstanding document. The last thing I wanted to point out is that you might not actually be looking for a job right now, and I get that. This is just preparing you for when you're ready to look for a job. So if you don't have anything in mind, think about a general resume. Think about something that you would like to present to an employer. If it helps you in your mind, think of a specific employer that you would like to apply to someday, or, like a pipe dream. Hey, I would love to work for Google, and think about it like that. So don't just make it a generalized resume that doesn't have very persuasive language. Make sure it's persuasive, but I understand you might not be applying for a job right now. If you have questions, feel free to send me a message on Blackboard. I'm happy to help. And I would love to see those rough drafts of your resumes and cover letters and reference sheets later in the week so that you can get those bonus points, but also that you can get some feedback from me. I hope you're having a great week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you again in the next lecture.